kids too, because that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, it is 7 on the dot. Let's go ahead and get started then. So on behalf of our sponsors, the Clearwater Neighborhood Coalition, the City of Clearwater, and the Suncoast Sierra Club, we welcome you to the 3rd Building Better Neighborhoods Conference. I am your moderator, Sheridan Boyle, the City of Clearwater Sustainability Coordinator. We love our city, and the purpose of this series of webinars is to support sustainable neighborhoods and improve the quality of life for our residents. Our topic this year is building better neighborhoods through home gardening and Florida-friendly landscaping. This topic is especially timely now due to our COVID-19 confinement. We know that many of you are considering ways to relieve stress and make staying at home creative and productive. Gardening is a great way to do just that. We invite you now to sit back and listen to the experts. This conference is one of a series of 4 and is being recorded. This recording will be available at the City of Clearwater's website. To get there on the web, go to myclearwater.com/bbn, and I will repeat this and provide that with text at the end of this conference. A few housekeeping reminders before we begin. You are all on attendee mode, which means you can't share your video or unmute yourselves. This is done to make sure tonight's webinar goes as smoothly as possible. However, we would absolutely love to answer your questions and have saved 10 minutes at the end of tonight's session to address them. Let me get to the next slide. There we go. So to submit a question, please type it into the Q&A box. You will notice that you also have a chat feature, which you can use to express a thought. However, we will only be pulling questions from the Q&A box specifically, so make sure that's where you put your questions. After typing your question, be sure to hit the enter button to officially submit it as well. So tonight's topic, titled What Nobody Ever Told You About the Birds and the Bees, is all about how we can use Florida native plants to create ecologically positive and aesthetically pleasing gardens. We are fortunate to be led in this discussion by 3 native plant experts who will serve as tonight's panelists. First is Davis Burkitts. So Davis is the office manager and content production manager at the amazing Wilcox Nursery, and he has 6+ years of work experience with Florida native plants. His first job was in landscape maintenance, working with primarily native yards. From there, he joined the Wilcox team, where he now works to connect with customers through platforms like Instagram and YouTube. They have an awesome YouTube channel, providing engaging content about Florida native plants and sustainability. Next, we have Stephanie Cotant. As a native preserve ranger at Boyd Hill Nature Preserve for many years, Stephanie led wildflower walks and other programs, as well as running the volunteer gardening program and plant sale program. She focused on educating anyone who would listen about native plants in our homes as part of a living landscape, stitching ecosystems back together 1 yard at a time. Now she has moved over full-time at the preserve, doing land management work, dealing firsthand with habitat restoration and invasive species removal. Taking any opportunity to talk about the preserve, you can find her along the trails, and all conversations are welcome. Stephanie is a member of the Florida Native Plant Society and represents our local Pinellas chapter on this panel. And finally, we are joined tonight by Stephan Babiak. Stephan Babiak has over 5 years of experience working with Florida native plants, formerly as the nursery production manager at Wilcox Nursery, and currently as the owner of Wise Hands Professional Gardening Services. Through his work with Wise Hands, Stephan and crew maintain, design, and install majority Florida native landscapes and help clients enhance the ecosystems of their properties. His favorite thing about native plants is that they help him connect to real Florida. So welcome, Davis, Stephanie, and Stephan. Thank you for being here. We are so excited to learn from you. And we have 6 questions that have been submitted for your expertise and your experience before we open it for questions from the audience. Oh, I should have hit the slides. So here are their faces. You can also see them. So thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. So our first question is, why should I care about pollinators? And specifically, why is it important to help them now? Davis, do you want to start on this one?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Sheridan, for the introduction. It was wonderful. And I'm a little upset that we got to skip over Stephan's picture because it was a
Oh, yeah.
fantastic. Yeah, look at that pose. That's just, if that doesn't inspire you to plant native plants in your yard, I don't really know what will. So yeah, I mean, this is kind of like the bedrock of a lot of the questions that we get in the nursery a lot of times is why should we care? Oh, I am so sorry. I got a cat on my desk. Is why you should care. You know, the whole idea about native plants is that they are supporting wildlife and they're supporting these little ecosystems that you're trying to kind of reintroduce into your yard. So, you know, it's kind of the reason why. So you want to be bringing in different insects, pollinators, things. One, because they're supposed to be there. They're supposed to be interacting with the plants, you know, creating these sustainable ecosystems and providing the benefit that they bring into, you know, the natural world into your yard. You know, and we have so many different, we have so many opportunities, albeit very small, I think sometimes in the landscape sense, to reintroduce these types of things that we've taken away as development has gone on and things like that. It's kind of the centerpiece for when we talk about introducing native plants or trying to just start introducing the topic of native plants to our customers. It's all about what kind of pollinators can you support, bringing in bees to nectar on things like gaillardia, like you see in that picture there. What kinds of plants can I plant that will allow different species of butterflies to host on them, you know, bringing in things that will continue in cycles and stages. And that's really kind of the thing that we'll always come back to when we talk about native plants is what can you support and what can you sort of invite back into your landscape.
Awesome. Stephanie, do you have any thoughts to add to this question of why should we care about pollinators and why now specifically?
Why now specifically is definitely because of just the sheer size of habitat loss that occurs and has occurred and is occurring in Florida every day. A lot of people come to my preserve and go on the trails, and I'm a big hiker. I go to a lot of places. I love those natural places. I think a lot of people go to them and think that, oh, nature's here, it's okay, and don't realize that that's just one place. It's a fragment, it's a small space left remaining, whereas you look at our yards and our neighborhoods and our cities and they just sprawl across the landscape. If we could remember what was there before, and if we could introduce a little bit back of what's supposed to be there, if we just do a little bit on each of our yards, we could really, really do a huge service that is just needed. It's critical across everything. And insects and pollinators need more than just like little preserves and parks to live in, especially in Pinellas. So.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, we're trying not to have little wildlife deserts, so our yards can be the connectors. Yeah. Stephan, do you have any thoughts to add to that?
Yeah, I definitely, first of all, I want to thank you for putting this together. This is really cool. I think this is really important for people to be able to ask these questions and get some good answers. And I have to say that Stephanie, what she just said is, I agree with that 110%. Like, you know, when you step back and look at, and you walk into that little park and it is a fragment, it's nice to feel like you're in nature, but look behind the interstate and the neighborhood and the Wawa. We're always picking on Wawa because they're everywhere, or the Dunkin' Donuts or whatever. What was there before? You know, we've created a beautiful world for human beings, but we've lost something along the way. And I think now we're finally starting to look back and try to see what we can do to improve that. And I agree with her 100% that it is one yard and one space at a time. What you can do in your neighborhood is so important, and it really does add to that connectivity because the habitats are fragmented. There's a reason we don't have things like panthers and bears and bobcats, some of these larger mammals, because they need more space. But we can do something for the smaller creatures, specifically the pollinators and the insects. And I have to say, honeybees are not from North America. They're not from Florida. They're cute. They're cool. They're easy to talk about because we like honey. But it's important to understand that if we talk about diversity in our human society, and we love diversity. We don't ever talk about diversity in our pollinators, in the life that's around us. We don't care if we just see, when you're just seeing a honeybee, you're not supporting that diversity. So support diversity in your community through, you know, people and society is great, but we have to also do that in our yards. So now is no better time than right now. I think we've all had a nice reset from this last year. You slowed down. So look in your yard, see what you can add. And we're going to talk more about plants and everything like that. But what Stephanie said, and also what David said, 100%. And just throwing it out there real quick too. You know, it's something that I think everybody can do just a little part. You can take a small little chunk and improve it. And we're gonna talk about that in the further questions. But yeah, I agree 100%. The feel is where I'm coming from. It's all about that feel. You feel it in your heart. It's something that's we all of us love. But yeah, what Davis and Stephanie said, that was awesome. So yeah.
Yeah, I thank you for bringing up that point too, because I think it's a surprise to many people when they find out that honeybees aren't native to North America. They're like a European species. And generally when we see like that save the bee, a lot of times it's accompanied by like a honeycomb or something like that, which absolutely, you know, in terms of providing like a food source with honey, and they do provide pollination services, but we have over 300 species of native bees. So encouraging people to get to know them and value them. And one way that you can value them is through your property. So excellent points all around. I want to live in this presentation already. So, so our second question is, talking on that, what plants should I plant to support Florida's pollinators? And Stephan, do you want to start with this since we got to you last?
Sure, yeah. So I had done just kind of a quick list, and I'm sorry if to Davis and Stephanie if I'm going to steal the best ones, but maybe you guys got some different ones. I'm sure you have a ton of different plants in your head, but some of the easiest things I would say is obviously first and foremost you want to plant a majority of native plants, and I say that majority because in my yard currently I have mango, I have Barbados cherry, I have vegetables, I have some borage, things like that I think are also great because you're feeding yourself, you're still connecting with nature, but the vast majority of my yard is native. And if you want to attract the largest diversity of pollinators and birds and even small mammals and bats and things like that, you need to plant native plants, period. But yes, things can, you know, you can have a couple pigeons that pluck around in your Brazilian pepper patch or something like that, but that's not increasing that biodiversity. That's not helping anything. So that's the first and foremost thing, native plants. And real quick, just off the top of my head, my favorite ones that I see pollinators just going bonkers for, native firebush, tropical sage, tropical salvia, and what's called gray leaf or tea bush, which is one we brought in recently. That's one literally where the bees will be following you home to be like, okay, yeah, I'll stay here. This is a nice place for me. I can live here. So those three I would say, and they're all three great full sun plants. So firebush, salvia, and tea bush would be my top three for pollinators. But any native plant that works in your yard will attract some sort of pollinator, will be a host plant for something, and will add to the biodiversity of your yard. So yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, great points there. Stephanie, do you have any suggestions?
I would say grasses. A lot of people forget about grasses, and I see a lot of native plant yards that go bonkers with the really available retail stuff and lots of flowers and showy things, but people forget grasses are the basis of ecosystems in Florida. So plant grasses, not lawn and turf grasses, but different kinds of grasses. Look for diversity. Love grasses, Fakahatchee grass, any kind of wiregrass or stricta, anything that you can get. Fakahatchee grass is a host plant for several different species of butterflies. And there are species of moths that love and require a lot of different grasses as part of their life cycle. And it's not just for host plants, but for shelter. Grasses provide a thick blanket sometimes for a lot of things to grow and live. And a lot of birds require it for nest building. Grasses are stricta, wiregrasses are great for nest building for some species. So just thinking about that, I think, is really important. Grasses, just give it a try. Whatever works for your yard. There's marsh grasses and upland grasses and dry grasses and sunny grasses and shade grasses.
That's a great point, and I'm really glad that you specified that we're not talking about like turf grass, that we're talking about like native clumping grasses. And yeah, and they can be like visually appealing in and of themselves. Like anyone, even if they don't know the name muley grass, like they've seen muley grass in the fall and they thought it was beautiful. So yeah, excellent point there. Davis, what plants should I plant if I want to support pollinators on my property?
Yeah, I mean, I think they both touched on the most important word. I think when you're talking about like plant selection is diversity. You know, you want to have, even of native plants, you want to have a diversity of those native plants because, you know, a couple different types of plants may support a certain sort of circle of wildlife, and say another one, you know, another grouping might support a totally different circle of wildlife. So it's definitely important to make sure that you're planting a diversity of plants, and grasses are certainly important. Florida's home to a whole lot of native grasses. So just kind of covering the whole strata of, you know, wildflowers, shrubs, grasses, palms and trees. Like, you know, there's so much out there. And it's kind of important to, you know, have one of everything, you know, or a handful of, you know, a sort of focused group of plants. But yeah, I definitely like the grasses. I think also a really cool sort of more focused topic is like having plants that are very specific about what they benefit. I mean, you could get things like saltbush or baccharis that are pivotal in supporting migrating butterflies. So when they bloom in like the late fall, they're there to offer a nectar source when butterflies are trying to migrate. So that's like a really, really important plant to have, you know, in an ecosystem, you know, setting. But it's also something that, you know, you can pick and choose and say, okay, well, this is definitely important out in the wild, so why wouldn't I, you know, put that here in my yard? So yeah, and definitely small trees. I'm kind of into all of my small trees. I live in an apartment and I wish I had a yard to plant out, but I would have an absolute forest in my backyard because I love supporting birds and having things that berry. And you know, you could go out, see all the colors, but also see that things are making nests and nectaring. And I think that's really cool too.
Yeah, so just for everyone watching, Stephan has done an amazing job listing some of the common names and scientific names of some of the plant species. So check the chat box if you want to see them. And I did want to ask Davis, maybe for you to elaborate. It was mentioned earlier that certain plants are host species and certain plants are nectar species. Could you explain what both those terms mean?
Yeah. So nectar, generally meaning food source. So these are things that butterflies or pollinators are going to go to collect nectar and that to sustain themselves. Host plant, more specifically, meaning that this is the plant that those, you know, particular butterflies, let's say, or caterpillars are going to be eating specifically. They're going to look for those specific plants to lay eggs, let the caterpillars eat them so that they can continue the cycle. So milkweed, you know, as an example, is the host plant for monarch butterflies, or Bahamacasia or Privicasia is the host plant for our sulfur butterflies, things like that.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. So let me get to our next question. There we go. Sometimes it gets stuck. So our third question is, do plants that attract bees attract other stinging insects like wasps and hornets? Who wants to try this one out first? This is a fun one.
Not to throw anyone under the bus, but I think Stephan had a really good point about this when I was talking to him earlier.
You know, throughout the day, I make so many great points and say so many amazing things. I can't keep track of them. But I wanted to ask real quick. I noticed that I was typing the names, but it said just to all panelists, and I did highlight all panelists and attendees. So have all those the names of the plants that we've been typing actually been getting to everybody?
Let's see here. It says to all panelists, so if you can copy and paste them and put them to maybe all panelists and attendees, that would be
Yep.
perfect.
Yeah, they said they can't see them. Okay,
Awesome.
we'll do that real quick.
Thank you for noticing that. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. All right, we're gonna post that. We're like, yeah, look at all these great things we're posting. They're like, yeah, we don't see any of that. Sorry, Kim and Bupendra. All right, so we're gonna make sure. Yeah, just put all panelists and attendees.
Perfect.
So this is always a fun question to get. You know, being at Wilcox, people are worried about things like wasps and hornets. The interesting thing is that most people that do get stung by insects, ironically enough, are actually stung by honeybees, because honeybees are very territorial, and usually they're in big groups. We don't have any colonizing bees like that. We have solitary bees that generally stay away from conflict. They are not looking to get into fight with anything. And the thing is, you can't discriminate what is coming to your yard, but you got to think of it this way: if you have so many flowers that all these insects that are coming that have, you know, the ability to sting, to defend themselves, they're going to be so preoccupied and focused on what they want, which is their food source, their pollen, the nectar, the flower, that they're not going to bother anything unless you physically go and like try to catch it and like smush it. You're not going to have any issues with stinging insects. But yes, anything attracts everything. You can't have some sort of force field that only lets pretty things come through. But I personally think I've seen some flies. They don't have the best name for them, hairy maggot blowflies, but they are a bright iridescent blue or green, and they're beautiful. The diversity of pollinators we have when you actually stop and look at them is incredible. So you should get comfortable with all of these things being in your yard. If you have somebody who's allergic to bee stings, again, they're going to be allergic to honeybee stings, but you're going to have to just take those precautions anyway. But I have been stung by bees once, and it was a honeybee, and I've been doing this for years. That's what I would say about that.
Yeah. And I think generally too, I mean, if the whole goal is pollination, right? That's such a vital service, then it doesn't matter if it's a bee versus a wasp. Is there, some people discuss wasps as being really beneficial for gardens because they're predatory insects. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
If someone else wants to take that, I mean, that's for sure. No, 100%. There's so many beneficial wasps. Davis? Stephanie?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like the other thing. I think less looked at unless you're really into into those circles. But it's always really important to be bringing in the pollinators. But you also talk about beneficial insects, and these are things that'll play a part in natural pest control. And we might be getting into that a little bit later, the whole pesticide issue.
Mm-hmm.
But you may not look at it that way. You may just say, okay, well, wasps are pollinators. I have flowers for the pollinators, therefore I will get wasps and they will sting me and I'll be sad. But, the thing is that, like Stephan said, you can't discriminate. So what you can do is pretty much put what you can out there and let nature, just work its course. So if you're bringing in wasps, they can, aside from, providing the pollination, they also play a really important role in keeping other populations of insects and things down. So, it's maybe not exactly what you're thinking as far as, bringing in wasps or being kind of afraid of them or whatever. But they definitely play an important role and can't discriminate. Just got to let them do their thing.
I think they're frequently also so busy doing the role of pollination, they don't even realize that you're there. So
Actually, I had a fun little story about that. I think this was probably about 2 years ago, but a couple classes from Monona came over, and I did like a walk and talk with these. I think they were second graders, but we were walking around the nursery, and we got to the tropical sage area, and I had a little. They were learning about pollinators and all that stuff. So I leant down and I tried to show them a wasp that was flying around tropical sage, and I tried to show them like there's really, there's nothing to be afraid of. That wasp is really busy. He's got a lot going on, got a lot on his plate, and he's got a quota to meet. I'm not going to talk to kids about quotas, but that there's important work to be done for them, and they're more concerned about getting that work done than, whether or not to terrorize you, so.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Stephanie, any last thoughts, or do you think Stephan and Davis did a good job on that one?
Yeah, I think it's just having a balanced ecosystem puts everything in a better place. And I think a lot of things people get stung by wasps are like on the eaves of houses, paper wasps and those kinds of things. And if you leave them alone, most of the time, they're not really going to bother you. And if you have a balanced ecosystem with all the predators and prey present, then I think it just balances itself out and it's really not a big deal.
Yeah, great point.
No good answer.
Awesome. Okay, well, we'll move on to the next one. Oh, so this is my prompt to take a poll. So this is for our audience, and this is my first time launching a poll, so please bear with me. So the question is, I hope, can the panelists see the questions right now at all? Can you see any question prompt? Okay, what if I do that?
Yes.
Can you see that?
I see that.
Awesome. So for the attendees, now is your opportunity to vote on what you would consider a pest. So of the animal species listed, what species would you consider a pest? And I'm going to give probably just a minute so that we can see.
This is good. This is fun. I like the interactivity of this.
I know, we're getting fancy now. I had to Google how to do a poll on Zoom today. So. I'm going to give 20 more seconds. So if you haven't yet answered, make sure to answer.
Stephan, are you outside right now?
I have the door open and I have the light on because we're talking about pollinators. So I want to feel the pollination around me as all the bugs come into the house right now. So there's some mosquitoes and moths. It's pretty nice out here.
Yeah, I heard some crickets in the background.
You actually hear crickets?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a nice.
Technology is good.
It's
yeah.
nice. It's it's homey. We're all outside in nature.
Yes.
Good.
Much better than my dog's barking, which I hope doesn't happen. So, okay, so I'm going to end the poll. Can you all see? Let's see. Let me share the results. Can you all see the results?
Ooh, possums.
So, Stephanie, please talk about this because this one is surprising to me, and I love possums. So please.
Possums are great.
Yes.
Possums are amazing, and possums are not pests. Possums live only 2 to 3 years. They show signs of geriatrics at 2 years. And they travel miles. They do not hang out really in your backyard. If you see a possum once, you will maybe never see that possum again. So that's just something most people don't know. What people mostly know is that possums are tick vacuums, right? They're nature's tick vacuums because they actually eat so many ticks off of themselves and fleas off of themselves because they're constantly grooming, and their fur is very specifically designed to capture fleas and ticks and keep them, and then they eat them. It's so cool. And so just let them be. Don't provide habitat for them to stay, and they really won't. They're hanging out for a night. They're looking around, they're moving on. Unlike raccoons that will come back again and again and live in their little routine and visit the same spots every night. The possums definitely don't do that. So if they roost or you think they're living in your space, they're really not. So they don't even make a nest to raise their young because their young are attached to them and they go with them where they are, and it's so cool. They're the best.
Yeah, I'm gonna completely butcher the statistics, so I don't want to say it, but I'm pretty sure like possums eat like a amount of ticks that almost matches their body weight or something.
Yeah,
Like
I've heard that. Yeah.
which is amazing, and they can't get or transmit rabies.
Right. Their body temperature is too low to get or transmit rabies. I think unlike armadillos, which do.
Yeah, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And fun fact, I didn't know I knew this much about possums, but I'm pretty sure their gestation period is only 2 weeks.
Right,
So
because they come out little beans, little grains of rice. They come birthed out the size of like a large grain of rice, and they crawl up into the pouch. It's a perilous journey.
yes.
So
this webinar isn't necessarily only about North America's only marsupial species, which is possum, but it's kind of giving a lens to what we're trying to get with this question is sometimes what one person would consider a pest isn't necessarily what the next person would consider a pest. And that is a perfect leeway into our next question. So I'm going to start with Davis on this one. Are there such things as friends or foes when it comes to garden animals?
Yeah, I think the general answer is yes. I think kind of like what you were alluding to, you have to kind of define what is a pest, what's beneficial and what's detrimental. I think in a broad sense, you could say anything that is a pest is something that causes detriment to your yard. And if we're talking about native plants in native yards, anything that could potentially harm the plants or the wildlife in it, you could consider, a foe, a garden foe. And friends, you could call things, beneficial insects that you'd be bringing in, things that are providing, beneficial services, things like that. So kind of getting that definition out there, you could see things like the picture that you have. The dragonflies are great because they keep some of those awful insect populations down. Things like butterflies, even the wasps could be considered that. It kind of all depends, maybe, when you look at it from a very wide lens and what your definition of harmful is. But yeah, I mean, I think dragonflies are really cool. They're really pretty. And those are things that I don't really hear people talking about, especially when we come into the nursery. They want to know about butterflies and bees and potentially birds, but then kind of under my breath, I'll go, "Oh, what about the dragonflies? They're cool." And they'll go, yeah, how do I do that? Hey, that fire bush over there looks pretty cool. And, but yeah, I think it's definitely important to recognize what's a friend, what's a foe, what's going to help you and what's going to hurt you when it comes to your yard.
Yeah. Stephan, do you have a response of, when we're talking about things that might be considered pests, and if there's such thing as like a garden friend versus a garden foe when it comes to animals in the garden?
Yeah, I would have to echo what Sane Curry Jensen said. A foe might be an invasive species or outside the native ecosystem. I think that's the first place to start. And I had to learn after a while of being in the native plant industry. We have the plants that we deal with, and then we have, obviously in Florida, we have some very, very dangerous, deleterious, awful animals that have been released here through the stupidity of humans or accidentally, that are definitely foes first and foremost. Around in our native our area, unfortunately, we have Cuban tree frogs, which always elicit a very a varied response when you talk about it, especially in social media, because they are cute. But they're cute murder machines. They eat and they eat and they eat, and they have almost completely wiped out our native frogs that we used to have around here. And it's really sad that people don't even know what those even look like anymore. You can still see some of them in maybe the more wild areas. But for example, yeah, Cuban tree frogs, you should not be happy that you're hosting Cuban tree frogs. It should not be a source of pride for you. It should be something that you see as a big issue. Like, you look at it the same as like having rats in your attic. It's not a good thing to attract them, and it's a hard thing to talk about because, yeah, people don't people don't like killing animals. I mean, they have no problem killing plants and clear cutting entire county to build things on. But, you know, when it comes to doing what needs to be done with invasive tree frogs, and the University of Florida has a whole page on how to do it as properly as you possibly can. But that would be first and foremost the foe when it comes to garden animals. The rest of the things, you know, I think they kind of form a balance pretty well. I love possums, and it's really cool what I learned from what Stephanie just told me about them being like magnets for ticks and fleas, and that's fascinating. I had no idea. I always thought they were really cute. Again, they're to some people they're precious and awesome, and some people they have those, you know, those wicked teeth, and they're kind of bumbling around and they bump into things, and they don't seem to be very fast. You don't know how the heck they can survive, but I've seen them wandering through the yard, and I love it. Lots of snakes too in my yard. I love to see the black racers, but I've seen some smaller snakes. Maybe Stephanie can tell me what kind. You know, different like little brown snakes. I've seen the ones with a little orange ring around their neck, ring-necked ones. But of course, I would love to have more diversity of snakes. But that's also a hard topic. People don't want to have a rattlesnake in their yard. It scares people, you know, things like that. I mean, that's why they were hunted down. You know, there's none around here. They're probably hiding in your nature sanctuary, which is, it's awesome that someone like you is there stewarding it, and they're beautiful part of our ecosystem. But that gets a little harder in your yard. But if you can have, I think it's more important to have an understanding, respect of nature than it is to just fear it and try to kill it, because we're only harming ourselves actually in the long run when we're taking things like that away and just hunting them down. And I'm looking forward to being able to teach that next generation. My wife is pregnant.
Yeah,
and
congratulations.
Yeah, she's doing a month, and I'm really excited to be able to take our child and show them what nature can offer and the diversity of nature, but also a respect, you know, a really profound respect for, you know, the danger that can come from it too. But we are the most dangerous animal overall, the human beings. But yeah, so that's my spiel on that.
Yeah, I think you bring up like a great example too. So there's differing opinions on possums, but for sure there's differing opinions on snakes. I think we could also see a parallel with coyotes. I'm actually really surprised that possums outranked coyotes, because if you look at, I think next door especially, like people always are talking about coyotes, and I absolutely love coyotes, but that's outside of the gardening topic right now. Stephanie, do you have any, I mean, you have just a wealth of like experience when it comes to different animals, especially that are native to our county. Do you have anything to add to this question?
No, most of my friends or foes are plants.
Okay.
So I really tend to focus on plants, like invasives being allelopathic and not letting your other things grow and stuff like that. But
Okay.
animals, they're there. You provide them the space and they will come and you just get to enjoy them.
Awesome. Okay, so moving on to our next question. So we are now at the question, which is, why are pesticides an issue, and are there more natural alternatives? I think, let's see, Stephanie, do you want to start with this one, and then I'll make it through to the others?
Yeah, pesticides are just an issue because, and pesticides including herbicides, but I use herbicides regularly at work. It is my job. I do have to use them in the war against invasive plants. But it's really just about the sheer amount that gets used in our agricultural society across the board. It's just a lot. And then when normal non-professional people use pesticides in their lawn, it's just adding to the problem and compounding. And some pesticides, we don't have a choice. We live in Pinellas County. Mosquito control fogs neighborhoods regularly. So if you think you have a pesticide-free yard, most of the time, if you live in a populated area, you can't control that. That's run by the county. But why are pesticides an issue? There's just a lot of them being used. So what can we do? You can't control everybody, but you can control your yard, your space. And there's just better alternatives. So the alternatives, you just start with IPM, Integrative Pest Management. That is the go-to, and as professionals, that's where the professionals should go to first also. If they're using chemical to solve a problem, that means they should have exhausted all other solutions first. So cultural practices. What am I doing to make this a problem in the first place? And how can I change it? Change the habitat, like mosquitoes, obviously. The first, it's talked about so much. The first thing is to try to just remove still water spaces, clean gutters, don't have buckets full of water, make sure your water thing's covered. It's excluding the habitat for the pest or the thing that is the problem, and trying to change our cultural practices so that we can then prevent the problem and not go to chemical. Chemical should always be your last solution. It should be your last choice.
Yeah, that's great points all around in that. I especially love that you talked about integrative pest management, which I wanted to mention. When we upload this recording of this webinar to our sustainability school, we're going to have different resources that are available that will dive deeper into certain topics, like where you can find native plants, plants that are native to Pinellas County using the Florida Native Plant Society website, and then also like resources on what explains integrative pest management more. So if you want that, you will get it with a reminder when this video is uploaded to myclearwater.com/bbn. But I wanted to ask Stephan, especially on the topic of maybe some herbicides and invasive plants specifically, like at what point, especially with wise hands, that you might consider, if something is a manual job and that can be, more organically or naturally maintained versus something that's like a really big issue, like invasive species presents, and how you go about that.
It's an interesting, it's definitely an interesting topic. And with what we've been doing with the maintenance, what I've found in this last year is that the yards that are jungles and filled with things like, pothos, Senegal date palm, carrot wood, queen palms, which are category 2 invasive, probably should be category 1 because they're everywhere, are the ones that, they pay us. They pay us to do this because there's so much work that goes into it, and the lawn maintenance companies won't do it because it takes so much time. So with that, we do a lot of mechanical removal. For example, pothos, which is a beautiful little house plant, a lot of house plants gone wild is what I deal with, is something that herbicide does not have any effect on. You have to rip it out. Syngonium, which is the arrow leaf plant, similar to pothos, climbing up trees. You have to rip it out by hand. African climbing fern. So that was an example of something I did today, and I go there on a weekly basis, and we've been chipping away at it. So that's a mechanical, physical removal that we do. But I've also had to use herbicide for sure. I use it as a tool in my entire toolbox. It's one more tool that I use. Like Stephanie was mentioning, IPM, Integrated Pest Management, is a great place to start, and it starts with planting the right plant in the right place. And that's more towards keeping the plants you have healthy so that you don't have to spray things down. And also, going back to our foundation of our conversation, being okay with a diversity of different things in your yard, because the aphids attract the lady beetles, and then the lady beetles will eat them, and then lacewings and all those kind of things. So being okay with a certain amount of I've heard it, if something's not eating your plant, you're not doing something right. If your plant is completely like plastic and pure all the time, then there's not something good going on there. But so we do use herbicide. It's something that is, yes, a tool in our toolbox. When we get calls from people that have had yards that are completely overtaken by invasive weeds, I use a chemical called phenol, and it's a derivative from a concentrated bacteria, and that doesn't mean that it's any less caustic. It's a chemical. I've tried to use organic ones before. There are natural alternatives: orange oil, vinegar, clover oil. The thing with those is they will burn your skin severely. So that's the downside of it. You have something that's going to be bad for you in the long run, absorbing through your body. But if you go and spray a 20% vinegar solution on it and you spray it in your eyes, you might have to go to the hospital. It's going to be serious. I've spilled orange oil down my back before. It burns like hell. So there's a balance to it. But again, reiterating what Stephanie said, IPM, look it up. It's a great starting foundational point, but there are places that herbicides should absolutely be used responsibly.
Awesome.
And just to reiterate, glyphosate is the bottom of the barrel of safe chemicals. Of course, it's a chemical and it has side effects, but if you stop using glyphosate, you start going up the chain of toxic things to find something to solve your problem with. So it is the safest of the pile, that's just what we have.
Yeah, I appreciate the discussion though, because it really reveals that there's really a spectrum. So Stephan, I love that quote of like, if something's not eating your garden, then your garden's not part of the ecosystem. So that it really should start with like, what is the intent of plants, right? Should be to be eaten or to, spread seed. And if it's a native plant and it's not an invasive plant, is something eating it a problem? So that observation, moving to manual, maybe if it is an issue, and removing it, and then moving up the chain of different chemical applications as they increase in severity. Davis, do you have any experience with Wilcox? Like if you all have, any procedures that you use for some of the plants there, or if you have any maybe unwelcome visiting plants that pop up?
Yeah, I mean, weeds are definitely always a problem. Whether or not they're coming from, not as well managed stock that we get in, whether or not we're getting pots in that are covered with weeds that we have to weed ourselves, and potentially that's spreading more seed, and us having to deal with that, getting into the rocks or into the nursery beds. That's one thing is weed control. We try to do a lot of that, like Stephan said, mechanically, trying to just remove them before those plants have an opportunity to go to seed. Sometimes, and fairly frequently, admittedly, it can get very bad, and we do have to do rounds of treatment. And like Stephan said, a lot of times we use that phenolly. There's also a sort of standard that we have to uphold as a nursery to make sure that our stuff is, up to grade, and making sure that everything is pest free. And you kind of mentioned that is making sure that, that the plant that is getting eaten, the fact that our milkweeds, 3 weeks after we've gotten in a new stock, that they have holes in all the leaves and everything. It's like, okay, well, that's not a pest. That's okay. That's supposed to be happening. So the first thing is always identifying, if it is a pest, and then, okay, if it is, what is it and how do I treat it? And, I think Stephanie and Stephan made a whole lot of good points and pretty much hit all the nails on the heads. That chemicals are the last line of defense, and trying all these other methods is definitely encouraged through, integrated pest management. Now, that being said, if there are some plants like Kunti sometimes can harbor sooty mold or scale or something like that, if that's a problem, then a lot of times it's only, within a small population of plants that are for sale, and those typically just get removed from inventory, spot treated, allowed, for the problem to resolve itself. And then, those plants, once they're deemed healthy enough, can come back out. But it's definitely important to understand what is a pest, what isn't, what shouldn't I be treating, because there's a lot of wasted energy, I think, on treating things that traditionally really aren't pests, for sure.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, what's coming out from each of you is that it's also specific rather than
like lubbers.
Broad.
Lubbers is a big one for gardeners, right? Grasshoppers.
Yeah, we should have talked about that earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot about lubbers. The big lubbers. A lot of people complain to me specifically about the lubbers, and they hate them so much and with such a passion because they ate their lilies. And it's like, well, that's what they do. They prefer amaryllis plants. That's their preferred food source. But if you don't have a monoculture of amaryllis, which a lot of people do when they have lilies, they'll put many, many, many of them together and they'll have a bed of lilies. And of course the lubbers populations explode because they love it. But if you don't have a monoculture of amaryllis flower plants, then they kind of graze on everything equally. They don't really, they're native to Florida, number one. They're native to the whole eastern coast, I think, of the United States. And they're great grasshoppers to have, but so many people hate them.
Yeah, so if anyone doesn't know about lubbers, they are the grasshoppers that are kind of larger, and sorry, my dog's going by, larger, and they kind of can be black, yellow, and red, and they can decimate things. And a monoculture is basically one species in a large area. So like if you plant one plant over and over and over again. So yeah, that definitely can help deter them because they're looking for a buffet, not an appetizer.
Stephanie, does anything eat lubber grasshoppers? Because I've heard that once they get big enough that they don't taste good. Is that true?
So many things eat them when they're little. When they're black and they're small, many things eat them. Lizards, their eggs are in the soil and are actually a part of the whole, their larvae form living in the soil is just, it's a whole thing, and they're part of that soil structure. And then when they're bigger, they do get toxic when they turn yellow. So if like your dog eats it, it's very bad, and you should probably get your dog checked out. It'll be fine, but it's not good. But loggerhead shrikes actually eat them as a regular diet, and the way they eat them is they impale them on thorns or spikes or fence posts. Chain link fence, they'll impale the lubber on the post, and the toxins drain out, and the shrikes will eat them.
Wow, is shrike a bird?
Yeah, it's a loggerhead shrike. It's a small songbird that is predatory. They'll eat lizards and stuff.
I've seen that, and that is incredibly awesome.
That's the coolest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, it is really, really cool.
So we have one more question, and then we'll get to it briefly, and so I can open it up for questions from the audience, which we have a couple great ones. Whoop, that one. There we go. So the last question, and I think we can probably address it pretty easily, is should we be concerned about rat poison in wildlife? Stephanie, I wonder, do you have a pretty good answer for this? I think I'm turning to you for general animal ecosystem.
I mean, we do a raptor center at Boyd Hill.
There you go.
We have birds of prey at our center. We don't take in injured birds, but a lot of the injured birds that we get offered, and most of the time in wildlife rehab, screech owls, especially, they come with poisoning. If you can pick up a screech owl, it has pesticide poisoning. It's gotten to a toxic level, and it's bioaccumulation, which is what happens, and it's actually from cockroaches mainly. So talk about rat poisoning, people are really concerned because rat poison is very, very toxic, but a lot of people don't think about what we do for cockroaches actually also affects birds, and specifically screech owls, which is a very common owl to find in neighborhoods and in your yard. And they're eating little bugs and beetles and cockroaches, and the toxins that we use inside the house, the bugs go outside and get eaten. And then it bioaccumulates in their systems, and they get lethargic and they drop out. And then you find them on the ground, and then they get taken to a wildlife rehabber, and sometimes they don't survive. And all we can do is, try to purge it from their systems. But a lot of times it's just a sit and wait.
Wow, I did not even think about that when it came to roaches. Does the Raptor Center recommend any difference? Like, are there like live traps for roaches or something?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just trying to not put that stuff outside, and just trying to, exclude and try to keep your house clean and that kind of stuff.
Okay. Yeah. Davis and Stephan, do you have anything to add on this question? I think Stephanie probably handled it pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, that was the big thing, is like, you don't really realize it, but there's a ripple effect to everything, specifically this, but even when you talk about any sort of removal of wildlife, a lot of these treatment options that are a little bit more are harsh in chemical treatments or poisons or things like that, they have ripple effects that can start to affect not just the intended population, but others that, kind of get hurt as a side effect. And I just think that's really important to highlight.
It's birds of prey specifically because they're at the apex, so they're at the top of that bioaccumulation in their systems. So hawks will get it a lot for eating rats and mice, and barred owls and great horned owls eat a lot of that too. So that it's bioaccumulating up into their system, so they're getting many, many doses from all the different things that they eat. And they have to eat a couple times, once or twice a day. So they actually eat quite a lot.
Mm-hmm. So when Stephanie says bioaccumulate, it means every time something is eaten, the toxicity can magnify as it moves up the food chain and then have an even more potent impact on, that larger predator. So, okay, so I want to get to some of these awesome questions while I have you guys. So one is from Howard. Hey, Howard Warshauer. Davis, he sees that your background has a balcony in it, which I think might be a green screen, right?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
my patio.
But it is a great question because he's asking if there are any particular native plants that do well in balcony conditions.
Yeah, I kind of kicking myself for this because I did a program about container gardening with native plants a few months ago, and I forgot to press the record button. So that I would have just directed you to that video. But yeah, there's a whole lot of different plants. A lot of like what I have, I'll go over here. A lot of what I have here are like Peperomias. I've got a couple different species of Peperomia. Those are really self-contained plants for like shady areas. I've got a couple different, I don't know if you can see, I got like a fern up here, swamp fern, and a couple of other things in this sort of like shady alcove that I have on my patio. And then honestly, there's a lot to choose from. Plants that don't get typically very big are pretty easy to keep in containers, and it's, there's not a whole lot of maintenance or upkeep with them other than just keeping them watered. So I have a couple different wildflowers over here, like Stokes aster, sun-loving twin flower, and I think, well, I had this kind of bonsai type thing here that I was very proud of for a while. It's a spiny black olive, which is a South Florida species of small tree, which is very, very cool. It has this really sort of small foliage, but I went on a safe, of course, but holiday break to visit family, and I forgot that to water anything or have anything set up so that they could get water, so it died. But everything else on my patio was living because, hey, native plants, great, very forgiving, especially in pots once they're grown in. So not saying don't water your plants, but if you forget, like I did, they're very forgiving. So there's quite a bit you can do there for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah, I guess Florida sun, if they're evolved for that, they can survive on a balcony and go without water for a little bit. But Stephan, so
Yes.
Chris is asking, could you explain the use of herbicide versus pesticide?
So this is one that actually Stephanie did kind of pop out real quick, but pesticides are anything that handles a pest. So that would be an insecticide, a rodenticide, a fungicide. That would be a pesticide, including an herbicide. So pesticide is the blanket term for all of those different things that kill a specific thing that you don't like.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's see. Davis, are morning glory and buttercup native?
So yeah, I have to gripe. I now that I've been in the industry for a little bit, I really do loathe some common names because they can be very general sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
We do have native morning glories, actually quite a bit. Ones that grow on the beaches, ones that grow more inland. Things like out on the beach, you may see these low-growing sort of vining plants that have these great big purple flowers, railroad vine. Those are native. And then there's another species that has little white flowers, and there's also different kinds of morning glories like man in the ground, which is an endangered species. So yeah, I think there are a number of Ipomia, which is the genus name, commonly referred to as the morning glories. That we do have a lot of those native species. Buttercup, if I'm understanding that correctly, is the little kind of perennial flowering plant with the yellow flowers. It isn't native. Some people call it like Cuban buttercup or Mexican buttercup. It is a nice sort of heat tolerant plant. But it is not native.
Awesome, thank you. Stephanie, we're getting I think we had 2 questions that were basically asking how can we identify invasive plants, and then how can we get tips on removing them? Do you have what are your favorite resources for?
The resource on invasives in Florida is FLEPC, which is Florida Exotic Pest Plant Council, and I think they recently changed their name to include non-plants, and I don't know what they changed it to, but you can still find FLEPC, FLPPC. It's real fun. The FLEPC is the organization that actually creates the list of invasive plants, and I believe they're starting to integrate animals as well, or fauna as well. So if you look that up, when we say category 1 or category 2, we mean it's from FLEPC, and they have lists 390 something species of plants on that list, and it's the category 1s, which are the really bad ones and have proven and been documented to cause harm. And they produce this list every year or every other year, I forget, but you can always see their most recent list because it changes from year to year. And that's where you find Brazilian pepper and Kogon grass. And once you're on that list, it used to be clickable, so you could click a link to a fact sheet about the plant. And that's where I go. And if I have a question, is this plant native or is this invasive? First thing, if it's acting invasively, I'll usually just go look at FLEPC and see if I can find it. And so and then the Florida Plant Atlas is where I go to ID things. And the Florida Plant Atlas is the USF herbarium specimens. And that's where I go to find pictures of the plants, and they fail on descriptions, but they do pictures, and they'll list whether it's native or non-native and regions. They'll show what counties they're vouchered for. So if it's in your county, there'll be a regional map showing that it was vouchered as a wild specimen in your county through the herbarium. So those are my 2 big resources, FLEPC and Florida Plant Atlas. It's IDing the plant first is your first step. Once you ID it, you're just gonna Google it and find IFAS, which is the UF IFAS County Extension Office. Every county has one, and they're through the University of Florida. They usually have fact sheets on everything and can explain everything, and that's all they do is spend their money on explaining things like that. So they're really good at it.
Awesome. Yeah, that's perfect. That wraps up most of our questions. I did want to take the opportunity to mention a couple of resources that we're going to provide on our Sustainability School platform. But the first is the Florida Native Plant Society website, which is an excellent resource. If you want to see what plants are native to your specific region, you would go to fnps.org/plants, I believe, but for sure fnps.org. And then you can select to see what plants are not only native to your region, but are perfect for your property. Stephan, your company's website is thewisehands.com, right?
Yes, it is.
Awesome. So another great resource for you. Wilcox website, Davis, is it wilcox.com?
WilcoxNursery.com.
WilcoxNursery.com. Okay, perfect. So let's see here. I want to make sure I get you guys on time because you are so wonderful for spending your evening with us.
No, this was fun. I really learned a lot from everybody, and yeah, appreciate it.
Good. I always love plant people because they always want to talk more rather than rush out.
I learned a lot from, I think what Stephanie is doing is super cool. Davis and I have spent a lot of time together. We're actually working on a podcast at the moment. It's out in the open now, man. So now we got to do it.
All right. Just dropping that one. Okay.
So,
yeah.
But yeah, so it's cool to learn stuff from you, Sheridan, and also from Stephanie. She's got some awesome information.
Yeah, I'm down at Boyd Hills, so you can join me anytime. We take volunteers all day, and I'll teach anybody how to remove invasives. I got lots of Brazilian pepper that still need to go from the park, so if anyone wants to learn how to do that.
Okay, I might take you up on that. So thank you guys. Thank you guys so much for sharing your wisdom with us. Again, this conference is one in a series of 4. We have 2 more left. And the next 2 webinar topics are Where Does Your Garden Grow?, which is going to focus all about growing food and the many ways that you can grow food in Pinellas County. And that is on Tuesday, the 16th at 7 p.m. And then our last webinar is all about Florida-friendly landscaping. So we are going to be led by Doris Heitzman, our Florida-friendly landscaping agent, who's amazing. And that webinar is on the 23rd. To learn more about our future webinars and to find a recording of this webinar and past webinars, as well as those deep dive resources, please visit myclearwater.com/bbn. And we appreciate your comments, which you can send to me at my email on the slide, which is sheridan.boyle@myclearwater.com. Thank you guys again, and I hope everyone has a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was
Thanks,
awesome.
everyone.
Thank you guys. Yay.